just to kick things off, I think it's important that we start out by defining what programmatic TV is. Pretty much every white paper I read, I seem to get a different definition. The more digital oriented the company writing the white paper is, the more digital their definition is. Jamie, what's programmatic TV mean to you? How would you define it?
To me, it's about, programmatic should be about, I should say, delivering effective advertising outcomes. The sad state of affairs that we have today in the programmatic world means that it's not about that. It's about yield and arbitrage and driving margins in the media, for the media agencies, trading desks, and all of that sort of thing. However, there's a full spectrum of programmatic in that it can cover everything from automated through to full biddable. I think the important thing to say today is that we are not in a position where we can enact programmatic TV in the true linear space.
Yeah, I think there's an important distinction between programmatic TV and video, which I think is sort of where there's a lot of gray area. And as the way that I would think about programmatic TV, and we think about programmatic TV, is, as you said, it's really programmatically inserting ads or deploying technology across the linear TV programming, as opposed to doing video programmatically. Because actually, as I'm sure we'll come on to talk about, and as you've obviously recognized by having a programmatic video panel right before a programmatic TV panel, I think there is a difference there in the cross-screen piece. The video piece is actually very evolved, both in its use of data for the effectiveness that you were talking about, which I agree with. Programmatic is really about leveraging data across the buy. It's very evolved, whether it's about the use of the inventory, et cetera, whereas I think programmatic TV is still much more nascent.
Yeah, I get frustrated actually when we talk about programmatic TV because it doesn't exist. It's not something that actually is there at the moment. I also slightly counter what Caspar says. I think long-form programmatic trading against premium television content is nascent. We launched a programmatic platform in March of this year, and I'd say it's taken us 5 to 6 months to scale that platform to any kind of size, to work with DSPs, to get DSPs to understand the rationale around serving multiple ads into long-form content is a notion that really didn't exist in the UK marketplace, I'd say 4 or 5 months ago. Programmatic's come from the display world where you're serving, there's huge amounts of inventory, you're serving ads which don't require confliction or delivery on time of day. We're moving programmatic to the TV-based environment comes with all sorts of complexities which we're working through. But it's to talk about programmatic TV, we have to get programmatic in the kind of digital video on demand space right first from a broadcasting perspective, I feel.
Yeah, if I see sort of the 3 A's of audience, auction, or automation, it's always a blur between each 3 buckets. And I think from an online video perspective, we've seen many players in there. I mean, we've invested ourselves in SpotX, which is online video centric, but we also invested in a company called Clipped, and they are actually sitting in Boston, and they are really working into identifying TV audiences, making the data kind of matchable and in sync with online video buying, and actually seeing how do you actually do the transaction in a TV environment, in a broadcasting environment. And we know all of these transaction and billing systems, all of this old traditional stuff, and this is now coming to a change. And I think it's still very nascent, and it's still very kind of clunky also, because every broadcaster has still got their proprietary solutions. But no doubt, slowly and gradually, there will be a kind of more automated and efficiency-driven way of buying media, especially if you look at fragmentation. I mean, there's no other way of handling so much inventory if you have thousands of channels. Yeah. Call them linear, call them OTT, linear, whatever. Yeah.
So what's happening behind the scenes to actually make this happen? I mean, we sort of talk about it at conferences, companies go up and present, and we've got all sorts of technology that talk about automation and more efficient workflows and all the rest of it. But what's actually happening? I mean, are meetings happening that where you're saying, right, we're going to be ready in 2016, or we're going to be ready? I mean, is the industry actually progressing towards this, or are we just talking at events like this?
So, from a broadcaster and platform standpoint, I think we're taking a step back and talking to advertisers and marketeers about what they want, and that should be the priority. And what we're trying to understand is how can TV exist and coexist and complement other media. We've heard talks today about cross-platform, and TV has that great brand building power, and how can that transcend across multiple different media platforms and services and devices? So yes, whether you're at Channel 4 or Sky or RTL, we're all thinking about what that ecosystem looks like, but what we're trying to understand is how do we deliver that in a compliant way that delivers effective campaigns for advertisers in a way that adds value to consumers. Those have got to be the three priorities.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think it's interesting if you sort of look across the landscape in Europe and globally. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of companies, publishers, agencies, everyone's sort of starting to experiment in this space. We're starting to see some really interesting things being done. Actually, I mean, you guys are doing really interesting stuff. There's really great stuff being done in Italy. It's very small at the moment still, but I mean, that's where you start. I think one of the challenges that we have as we all sort of talk a lot about programmatic TV, and I think I've sat on a panel like this now 3 years in a row. Yeah. Thank you. It's just that if you contrast where we are as a starting point in TV with where we were with digital, the deployment of the foundational technologies, the conditions precedent, if you like, the antecedents that existed in digital that enabled programmatic to be deployed relatively uniformly, very quickly, very globally. Actually, it's the exceptions that really stand out notably, where there's no third-party ad serving generally or whatever, that prove the rule. And it's the existence of those technologies, often within monopoly environments like Google to some extent, that have enabled that to spread very quickly. And I think one of the big challenges with TV is that at the moment publishers are all sort of coming up with their own, and broadcasters are coming up with their own sort of ideas, and they should be innovating, and there's no reason for them not to. But ultimately, the answer is going to come when the agencies can buy agnostically across all the channels using certain data sets, just like we do in display. Maybe even link those data sets to what we're doing in display and in video so that we have one view of everything. But that's a long way away, I think, still.
But just on that point, I mean, I can sort of empathize with agencies and buyers when they're looking at how programmatic TV seems to be evolving. For example, if I was to talk to Rhys, you guys have acquired Clip and Spot Exchange, so you've got proprietary technology at the broadcaster level across your broadcast properties across Europe. You guys are building your own data management systems and tools, as well as using some third-party, which combined with some third-party tech. You guys, again, you've built out your own sell-side stack, and you've got your own tech and data solutions. And then I go to the pay TV level, and again, I'm confronted with another set of data and another set of technologies. How is this possibly all going to stitch together, or is it just about, are you just going to, how is this going to work?
I'll say exactly.
Yeah.
No, there's two big gaps. There's a big technology gap at the moment in terms of being able to deliver programmatically, both in the video on demand space and also in the kind of like the TV sort of linear space. Which we're trying to we as a broadcaster that launched a programmatic platform beginning of this year, we're trying to shore up that gap and work with the technology providers to understand the complexities of delivering programmatically into app-based environments or set-top boxes, because we're seeing video on demand very much moving to the big screen, and that's a really so moving out of the cookie-based environments into app-based environments which aren't as trackable and hard to identify. I think the other big gap for me, and what is such a nascent business, we're seeing, I suppose, there's a trust gap going on. I mean, I think we need to walk up to what Jamie was saying around this whole issue of, I suppose, in inverted commas, arbitrage. And programmatic cannot be arbitrage in the long term because clients will walk away from it and won't buy into it. So there needs to be, and I think the onus is on the agencies as much as it is on us as publishers to try and close that gap with clients, because it feels like there's a misunderstanding of what programmatic means and how that can be articulated and what the value add and potential benefits are. And we believe there are benefits there, but I think in some cases in the past, programmatic has been very much used as a way of arbitraging, making margin, and hiding it from clients. And that's not going to work for a long-term sustainable business.
Caspar, I'm sorry, the A word, arbitrage, has come up 3 times now, so I really have to go back to you.
I completely agree. I mean, the idea of selling some inventory and just selling that same inventory at a high price, i.e. arbitrage, is absolutely deadly for this industry if that's what people are doing. You know, what matters, no, it is, I mean, what matters is, are you adding value in the middle? And you said yourself, I mean, we've invested in our own data platform. What we do is we create audiences, we deploy technology, we provide analytics and various other things which create value around the inventory, and that's what we sell. And we're extremely transparent with all of our advertisers on the fact that that's what they're doing. They're buying a product off us. Yeah. Even to the extent that Group M is building a programmatic trade desk, because obviously that's one form of programmatic execution. We recognize that. But there are other forms of programmatic execution where advertisers want to buy, for example, specific media, which is something that they wouldn't be able to do via Xaxis. You know, we wouldn't sell them a certain, if they came to us and said, we want to buy Sky, we'll sell them some Sky at a higher price. We just wouldn't do that. We never have and we never will. So, you know, Group M is innovating in this space also to create for those kinds of buyers a business which is based on a model which is more consistent with that kind of a buy to enable that to also happen. So for us as well, that's why I was saying before, it's really important that there's some, that for us to go into TV, there needs to be that ability to add value in the middle. Otherwise, we can't productize that and turn it into a product business, which is what Xaxis does.
I mean, one of the things that, you know, one of the recurring programmatic conversations is around the future of the agency, and there is this idea, which sometimes plays out in reality, that brands will take media buying in-house and set up their own trading desks. I know we've got some of them here today. Does programmatic TV, I mean, you know, TV money is such a big portion of the agency business. Does programmatic TV represent a threat to the agency model? I mean, or do you see yourself, I open this to all of you, do you see yourselves as having more brand direct relationships, or is it simply going to sort of change the way the existing players are trading?
I mean, very briefly, if I may just quickly.
Yeah.
Quick question was regarding agency. No, I don't. I think just as a philosophical point, perhaps, but I think it's a relevant one. You know, there is so much more complexity all the time in this industry, and unless somehow someone comes in with a magic wand and simplifies it all so that a client can have a magic optimize button, you know, there will always be clients who take advantage of the opportunities that technology creates for them to engage directly with publishers. Fine. Okay? There's no problem, especially those which have technology as their DNA. But most will actually, I think, rely in very different ways on their agencies, but still rely on their agencies.
I think that the discussion needs to move away of, I mean, obviously, I will shy away from the discussion on arbitrage and trading models and whatever, because that's not the topic. The point here, I think, is more about the accountability, and I think that's something that we need to address much better and much faster through our jigs and sort of the bar measurement or the GFK measurement or the AGF measurement or mediometry. I think that's where there's a huge lag behind in what is user reality now, and we're seeing some audience leakage that we need to sort of get a grip on. And to be honest, the online video world has also not the best tool set in the world there. So I think there's still, you know, there's still a huge kind of benefit of the TV measurement today in terms of accountability. But as more devices and more kinds of forms of consumption arise, I think the efforts need to be stronger there. And then actually programmatic TV will actually sort of sink into the data sets that may be more comparable and also more acceptable by the advertisers and valued in the end. Because if you have that accountability and this trust, then also you will be able to justify prices.
So, you know, from a Sky perspective, we feel that we've made some steps along the programmatic world. If you think about the automated processes that Sky AdSmart delivers, and we're really starting to see momentum and growth. And to your question about sort of changing the dynamics in the relationship, I think absolutely yes. I think what we're seeing more and more is that we're going back to a world where there is a tripartite relationship, where an advertiser is sharing data directly with Sky to enable to ad serve in the initial phase, then optimize all the way through the campaign. They want to be involved with the people that are owning and optimizing that campaign all the way through. And that means that we are no longer seen as a supplier, or it's no longer about a transactional relationship. And that is the risk that I think that we see with programmatic. if a content owner, a platform owner gives up control of its inventory, it's a very slippery slope, because ultimately it's the content owner, the platform owner, the one that gets fined, lose their license, or whatever it may be. We have to deliver an end-to-end service that is compliant with all of the laws and codes.
I think it's about consistency. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in the last year or so is the fact that agency trading desks are all doing it differently, be it Xaxis or ViviKey or AppyPerf or whatever. And again, that creates ultimately confusion in terms of what's going on and what programmatic means to clients. So I think absolutely agencies have a role in this programmatic world and moving into programmatic TV, but there is still this huge level of ambiguity and inconsistency about how agencies treat programmatic and how they articulate it to their clients and what the value add or the return is. And I'm not saying for 1 minute they all need to get together and agree what that is, but there needs to be some common themes, because at the moment, genuinely, I can walk into a different meeting with a different trading desk and have a night and day conversation about what programmatic means to them from a premium broadcaster perspective. And that for me is challenging as a publisher, let alone from a kind of a client perspective. It must be really, really confusing.
But I agree. It's interesting. This new programmatic world, and I know we really should be talking about TV and video rather than trade desk. But I mean, if you want to, we'll take it there. Yes, we do have very different strategies. This has been an opportunity for us to actually differentiate ourselves from each other, and data has provided an opportunity to differentiate ourselves from each other. The deployment of technology has provided the opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves from each other. And I agree. I mean, Xaxis is differentiated. We've invested in technology. We bought 24/7. We've built our own DMP. We have a very different strategy to the other trade desks. And I sometimes wish we didn't. I sometimes wish that we're all creating these kind of value-based product businesses that were being paid on the basis of how they performed. Because it would make my life much easier, because it would be that's just how it's done. But we don't. We have a differentiated proposition, and I will happily defend it until the day I die, because I believe it's the right way to do programmatic. Now, how that deploys across TV and other things, as I said, then depends on our ability to deploy those technologies also across all our partners. And I agree with you. I think publishers have more and more, and broadcasters have more and more of an important role to play, because ultimately that data you have is different to the data that I have, and is different to the data my client has. And it's actually bringing all of that together in a way that makes sense. That's why I said there's a role for an agency, but that role is different to the role to the agency now and yesterday. Right? It's an evolving piece.
But I suppose it's more of a discussion really also on on who gets access to which data. I think that's the true battle behind it, and I think the discussion that you will see is not only that you have many intermediaries kind of taking their little share from every dollar spent, which is totally contrary to what actually each of us actually from publisher or advertiser would really want. But the key here will be on how you will actually filter the data, or which kind of layers of tissue will you be having in there. Can an advertiser really see, or an agency see, really the total availability of a broadcaster or a publisher in future? I doubt it, and I don't think that would be healthy for that relationship. But I think there needs to be more transparency in actually what you see and what you can get for what kind of price in what kind of segment. I think that's going to be the art. And I mean, just look back in TV. I mean, research agencies actually do the media planning based on that kind of different layering of information they access, and not the advertiser directly. And these kind of models will transfer in some way or the other into the digital world.
Just, I'm going to stay on the data point, but John mentioned that your average broadcaster's data is quite a narrow data set in terms of the information you have. So how do sort of traditional broadcasters, I'm sure you're very advanced broadcasters, but how do you go about competing with the likes of we've got companies like Google obviously waiting in the wings.
Are they waiting in the wings? Is that what they're doing?
They're waiting. I see it actually more open in terms of, I think that RTL Group, we've kind of looked at YouTube for many years, and a couple of years ago we invested into the MCN business very heavily, and now creating something around 8 or 9 billion video views a month. And we are, with Maker and Disney together, the biggest partner on professional content and MCN business on YouTube. So I think, you can actually choose the role you want to sort of have, even in this actually bigger environment. Now you have Facebook, you have Snapchat, you have all kinds of new platforms coming, and there are opportunities to actually bring content and an offer to market. And yes, I'm not the biggest fan of the closed ecosystems, because I actually want to have my, if I'm producing content or if we are putting content onto a platform, then it would be helpful if we can actually also monetize it on our own accord, and also make sure that we actually get our money back, and not rely on a third party that is somewhere out there selling. So I think these are points that are going on, and this will move also for us. There will be more opportunities, and I think then we will come maybe to a more healthy market, and market dynamics. But I don't see this as a big threat where I'm just sitting there and staring at it and saying, I can't help anything about it.
But I mean, I don't want to go into the use of social platforms, but on the data point, so how do you what's your data proposition?
But data is really, really important, and we focus on data Channel 4 and have been for the last 3 years. But the other most important thing, more important than data, is content, and we have both of those things that we can pull together, which some of these other social platforms don't have. So we can deliver engaging, immersive viewing experience that are relevant to users, and we can also offer engaging commercial products off the back of that. And I think those are the two magic ingredients, and Jamie will probably talk for himself. But and that's kind of where we sit in that equation. Although we might not have billions of unique users registered to us, we've got 12 or 13 million that are registered that want a relationship with Channel 4, and also want an engaging, entertaining viewing experience where they will spend 20 or 30 minutes per session watching our content. They're not sitting there. We're not sitting there waiting for as Ed said from Facebook this morning, that 3-second thumb-stopping content. I mean, it just staggers me that advertisers are willing to pay for that kind of engagement when we're talking about 98% view-through of a 30-second ad on all four. We're talking about an average dwell time of around about 23, 24 minutes. And that's the frustration I have, is this sort of apples and oranges sort of like comparison that goes on with what we're trying to do in the broadcast premium programmatic world and what some of our, in inverted commas, competitors are doing in the social media space.
I mean, as much as it pains me to agree with John, I do, but I think I'd take it a couple of stages further. I think Sky is in that unique position where we have customers and not just users, so that's quite a positive. Means we get a huge amount of understanding on our customer base. But in terms of our viewing panels, we go so much further. So we are now in a position where we have 3 million households where we're getting second-by-second viewing data. And then if you contrast that to that nonsense that was written last week or presented last week at the brand thing that Google were presenting at, which is they were encouraging brands to move 24% of their TV budget onto YouTube, and that is the same YouTube channel that, if you read all the articles 2 weeks before, where 65% of the content is fraudulent, i.e. viewed by bots. I think we need to take stock and sort of review these articles, these claims, these statements. And Ed's point this morning about the Nielsen panel, compare that. Barb, as robust as it is, we have a panel 6,000 times the size. The Nielsen panel, 1,000 times the size. And it's not about, social tweets and social posts and all that. It's actual households viewing. And so we need to sort of do away with all the claims and the self-serving stuff and think about that very first point that came out of my mouth, advertiser effectiveness.
So just to clarify what the article you were talking about, I think YouTube claimed that 24% of TV budgets should be moved to YouTube.
Yep. So what they did, as I understand it...
Something at a similar level to, I think it was Eileen Naughton who said it last week. I think Matt Britton at IBC yesterday, went to IBC last year and said, we're very much a partner, not a predator to the TV industry. Those two very public statements, obviously well thought out statements, they weren't off the cuff remarks, seem to have a conflict of, this would be a bit of a conflict there. So, I mean,
yeah, we are a partner of Google in some ways.
Yeah.
We work with them on the buy side as part of our marketing team. We use Google as our display, our mobile ad server. Yeah. But they perform a function for us. reviewing campaigns and isolating specific commercials or videos on YouTube that might drive incremental reach is not real-world planning. It's complete nonsense in this day and age to build, to suggest that 24% of £4.5 billion TV market should be moved onto YouTube on the basis of that utter claptrap.
But you will find this now, ever more sort of people vagabonding around with these stories in each market. I mean, just seen this in France. I mean, also there, you sort of claim in-stream kind of formats, yeah, and somebody comes along and says it's outstream, and then it's obviously it's the same value, and it's kind of sort of discussed in a way that actually a long-form video and that kind of more premium content environment doesn't really matter anymore. And depending on who's sitting and who's talking from one side, obviously somebody starts believing it, and then there's also some tactical movements from the agency or the advertiser side saying, okay, can we sort of play this and sort of bring prices down and sort of shift some budgets into. So it's really a tit-for-tat kind of game that we're sort of experiencing there, and I think the programmatic noise is also being abused in one way or the other, just to make it interesting for a media buyer to jump in. So but I mean, let's face it, that's the market reality at the moment that we have to cut through.
The company that's waiting in the wings, you were saying, right?
Yeah. Here they are. All four of your companies, you're all sort of large, from large established media and agency businesses. One of the things when programmatic was first introduced, it was commonly said and was believed by some that companies like yours, and I'll put broadcasters, pay TV operators, and agencies, wouldn't be capable of incorporating the technology, the data, and the culture that's necessary to keep innovating and driving those businesses forward. There were lots of people who said you couldn't do it. So just wanted to get a handle on, firstly, how you're succeeding, what the challenges are, what the work still has to be done. Is it just I know all of you guys are very smart and forward-looking, but I'm sure there are dinosaurs in your organizations that you would like to.
Not a WPP, no.
I think it's really difficult. Sorry, just to jump in. I think it's really challenging to get the right skill set in to enact change and enable this kind of revolution within a business. And we experienced that about 3.5 years ago when we embarked on our data strategy. So we've probably got about 40 or 50 people that are data scientists that sit there and run our DMP effectively, and come from a completely different skill set that you would have in a traditional broadcast, which is all about creating great, engaging content, scheduling it in the right way, and selling the advertising off the back of it. And so you have to adapt and change and evolve, and also you have to make bets. And we made a big bet 3 years ago, and I think probably our biggest direct competitor at the time was sat there, ITV, going, what is Channel 4 doing, making a bet on data? What's that all about? We'll invest in independent production companies instead, and they've done that very successfully. But I think for us, that's allowed us to lead the market, particularly in the technology and digital space from an advertising perspective, because we've had that bedrock of data, number one. But it's not just about collecting data, it's knowing how to use it and utilize it in the right way and employ the best technical partners to be able to deliver you platforms that then can enable other things to come off the back of it.
So we've had to evolve over the last few years because we have been innovating at such a rate. So we tend to hothouse teams so that we create a specific environment where we support new products, new structures, new teams, to allow them to grow. So we have an analytics specialist team, an ad smart specialist team, programmatic team that are enabled and allowed to sort of advance forward at a rate that doesn't hold the rest of the business back. It doesn't divert the rest of the business. We turn over £1.3 billion a year in ad revenue. You don't want to divert that focus away from that. But we fully believe that we need to evolve as an organisation, give the investment and the support that is required. And that's why we've got, probably 30% of the staff at Sky Media are focused on product innovation or new services.
And if they fail, are they allowed to fail? You get fired. Yeah, I mean, no, but it's interesting. Because I think it's very difficult, actually. I think we're all dealing, as you said, agencies as well, with big legacy structures, lots of deeply ingrained ways of working. And I mean, when we started Xaxis, it was one of the questions was, do we build teams within the agencies? Do we build a team at Group M or something like that? And actually, we made a very conscious decision, which was controversial at the time, because if you know WPP, we don't usually integrate things. We buy businesses, and it's not an integration strategy. It's a different strategy in terms of how we build our business. But we brought together a number of different things, gave it a new brand, gave it a logo, gave it created a business, partly to resolve a lot of the things which you were talking about. It created a business which could have failed as well, at various stages. But the only people who were going to get fired were the people who'd put their hands up to say, "We'll run it." But it also gave a place for us to invest in technology through. It enabled us to hire people. I think one of the challenges that agencies have is creating career paths for data scientists and developers and tech specialists and all that sort of stuff. It's just, I'm not saying they can't hire them, they often do, and they're getting better at it, but 4 or 5 years ago, those guys, there's no way they would have gone to work at an agency. No way in a million years. We've got, just like you, we've got data scientists from CERN. Right? I've never even heard of advertising, but we've been able to create a brand with Xaxis, which is, well, I've heard of advertising, but they certainly haven't heard of the industries and the businesses in the industry. So, we were able to, the whole point was to create a hub for those people that we could welcome them there and give them a career path, which is, very different to the agency one, which sort of tends to go into trading or client leadership or something like that. And it's worked very well, but that entrepreneurial sort of thing is difficult because it does require a lot of commitment from the organization.
We've about 8 minutes left. Just wondering, is there any questions from the floor at all at this stage? No hands? No?
Well, we've done a spectacular job.
No. Yeah. Might as well just finish now. So, I mean, if you were to put a date on when you think programmatic TV will be fully up and functioning and the buy and sell side will be joyfully automating their workflow processes together, how long is this going to take? I mean,
I don't know. I was just looking at when you said 4 or 5 years ago. Actually, in 2010, we actually looked at targeted TV advertising, and Google TV was out, and everybody was saying, "Oh, they're coming." Yeah, so it was kind of a panic. Everybody on board, and we looked at it, and it's kind of said, "Okay, it'll take 5 to 6 years." So till actually targeted TV advertising would be kind of there in its first kind of instances, not fully fledged. And at that point, actually, there was also this whole debate, will we be a kind of a technology company or not a technology company? All these kind of points. And to be honest, it'll go sort of really step by step. And I think you can sort of turn around the arguments as you like it, and the answer will be yes, we will need more engineers. It's pretty obvious, yeah. But I think that for programmatic TV, there are still a couple of years to come, and I think you're seeing some first starts in the US, but it's going to go also maybe in a different segment, in a different area. You will see some first tests coming up in Europe. I'm pretty sure in the next year or so. I'm seeing all these test balloons being sort of coming in there. But is this going to take a majority of the market in the next 5 years? Not so sure. I would be saying that yes, we want to make it more efficient kind of media buying, have more automated sales tools and buying tools in there. And if I have my own platform, I would love to do something that Claimy is doing with the AdSmart solution. But I mean, you're also seeing in the US some companies that are trying to sort of bring this kind of data and addressability from the homes into the buying process. But I think there is still a lot of industry logic to sort out between whose data it is and who's going to sort of be the selling interface.
Jonathan, do you want to give a fixed date, commit to next year?
I suppose it depends what you're asking, what the question is. I mean, the reality is that Sky AdSmart solution is some form of automated ad insertion, dynamic ad insertion. So that's, in inverted commas, programmatic. We launched dynamic ad insertion into a live stream. We announced it last week within IP-delivered streams on mobile, tablet, and PC. So it's happening at a relatively low level. I think what your real question is, when is this going to happen at scale across all the broadcast networks? And that is a very, very difficult question to answer. And I think we'll be sat here probably 2 years from now still having the same debate, because in terms of what you're talking about, there's an infrastructure conversation. Well, there's two ways we think that programmatic linear will work, which is at the point of delivery or at the point of insertion. Now, at the point of delivery, you're very much dependent on the technology stack, platform, set-top boxes that you have. Sky's got in probably half of the UK's homes. So that's a great start, but there's still another half that you can't serve. So is there a way of doing dynamic ad insertion, but at the point of insertion, so to speak? And that's something that we're looking at. So then you can start thinking about being platform agnostic. So you don't have to worry about what platform you're delivering your ad on, but maybe it's booking in real time or near real time. Now that requires a change in the dynamics, and that's coming. So, sorry, in terms of audience measurements. So Barber delivering minute-by-minute ratings, I think, at the beginning of next year. So that gives you the added information. We currently book, I think, about 6 to 8 weeks out on our schedule, our linear schedule. So that's, if you think about it, 6 to 8 weeks of information going backwards that we base a rating, a prediction, or a rating on. If we can get that prediction of that rating within a minute or within an hour of that spot being TX, that starts to become quite interesting. So that could happen sooner.
I suspect there are people in the audience, probably, but no, I'm going to come to you now, Jimmy, and we're going to stay on a similar point. But a lot of people, you know, who I speak to, you know, they say, well, why don't they just put TV on the internet? We could have it all. We could have OTT services tomorrow, delivering everything, and programmatic TV could be up and running in the same way it is online.
We break it.
So that point being is the infrastructure.
So it is the most efficient and effective way for Sky to deliver its content. You cannot deliver high definition, you know, football matches or anything like that to millions of households with that amount of pixels on the screen without breaking the internet. So you have to deliver it via the satellite. In our case, or via cable if you're Virgin or Liberty Global or whatever. Just to go back to your previous point, I think the interesting thing that John raised is that we have all these different delivery mechanisms for content into the home. So imagine trying to ad serve into Freeview, which is a pure stream. It's not possible. It's not the way the world works. So in the long term, whilst we have some programmatic capability now, the long term is programmatic, but not as we know it. You know, it might be advanced reservation and all those sort of things. But I think, you know, go back to that point. Think about the power of TV. What is it all about? It's about building those brand, you know, fame-building moments, those sort of brand-building moments. You know, that centre break of X Factor, Gogglebox, or Game of Thrones. So I've managed to include everyone there. And where, you know, you want to launch your product. You don't need to trade that programmatically. An advertiser doesn't really care about trading that programmatically. They want to be able to trade in different ways with different platforms. And we need to service our customers and our advertisers on a multitude of platforms and multitude of different services. And that's what I imagine Channel 4 are about, and that's absolutely what Sky are about.
It's interesting, it does rain, I mean, we've got 1 minute left, but you know, I think the other thing which we haven't really talked about is how TV viewing habits are changing, because that does also impact on this stuff. You know, it's fine to run a programmatically data-targeted ad when you've got an individual watching something sort of on, you know, on like an old show or something like that. But when you've got a whole bunch of people watching Strictly on a Saturday, you know, it's a totally different experience. It's a totally different advertising experience. It's a totally different engagement experience. And you know, a highly targeted, data-centric ad in that time slot in a linear feed, I mean, actually, the value is probably in it not being data targeted, right? So it's again, we have to sort of think about where we're deploying all of these different things, and the reality is that, you know, they all have their use cases, and it's never going to be a case where it's like, well, when is it all going to be programmatic? Thank you very much.
I should say that tomorrow afternoon we've got an industry debate, and the motion is this House believes millennials have deserted TV and are not coming back. So
Which I don't agree with, by the way. I just think they're watching different things on TVs and they're watching different things not on TVs. So TV is a screen. It's an incredibly effective screen. It's brilliant for. I mean, I love watching movies on my screen. It's like, you know, everyone's different, right?
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much for a fantastic panel. Give them a good round of applause, please. Cheers.